Howdy folks, Greyhawk 4x4 coming at you again, your resident vintage gamer. Today's video, we are going to address the statements by several politicians today and yesterday regarding the mass shootings that are in the news, in which these politicians have stated, they've stated that they believe that video games are partially to blame for this violence. Now, having laid that foundation, a couple of disclaimers here. Number one, it is told to us YouTubers that you want to avoid politics unless you have a specifically a politically driven channel. That is what your content is. Everybody else, we're supposed to just avoid it. You know, gaming people, we should avoid politics because you can automatically alienate half of your audience, half of your subscribers. I believe that is true. However, I don't give a shit. Which leads me to my second thing. The YouTube algorithm and all that other bullshit about you can't curse and everything else. I don't give a shit. I'm not monetized anyway. The gloves are off. Let's roll. So here we are again. We are back at this same bullshit situation of politicians and some members of the media trying to lay blame for something that has happened in the world, lay blame upon our hobby, gaming. I've done videos like this before, years before, you know, when we've had other mass shootings or something like that, and that same goddamn thing will crop up about, oh, violent video games must, you know, well, why is it that violent video games that are available in all these other countries, they don't have the mass shootings that we do? Why, they're playing the games just like, same games. I am proudly wearing, I made a point to wear my first-person shooter representation here. Here is my Skyhook shirt, which you would know from BioShock Infinite, which was a great game. First-person shooter. My Half-Life 2 hat here that you could only get if you ordered the Platinum version. When it first came out, there was a Platinum version that they even mailed you a physical box with like the strategy guide and this hat and some posters and all kinds of stuff. And another first-person shooter right here. Been playing them for years. And will continue to play them. Now, when I say we find ourselves in the same situation with regard to our hobby, gaming, I'm not just talking about video games. Even though that's what this particular instance has brought to the forefront. They're bringing video games back into the realm of culpability, if you will have it, which I will not have it. I'm not going to buy into any of that bullshit. None. Zero. So, we had, back in the 80s, you have this book here called The Dungeon Master. And it is the disappearance of James Dallas Egbert III. This kid was at a university and he played Dungeons and Dragons. Tabletop Dungeons and Dragons. And he disappeared, and his parents believed that it was because of Dungeons and Dragons. So they hired a private investigator, and he went looking for him. He ends up finding him, and it had nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons. It had everything to do with depression and drug use, and he was struggling with the fact that he wanted to come out as gay, and he didn't know how to do that, and he was struggling with that. And so all these other things had nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons, but it did not stop the media, and of course politicians and everybody, you know, those folks, from jumping on the bandwagon and trying to demonize the game of Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop role-playing games and so forth. as, you know, bad influences, and they're going to make our kids kill themselves, and we're, you know, this whole hysteria thing. We had it then, okay? And now every once in a while we have it again now specifically they're talking about first-person shooters. However, all of the data shows that there is no correlation between violent video games, first-person shooters, whatever, and making people violent. As a matter of fact, I'm linking a couple of articles, one from PC Magazine and one from PC Gamer. The PC Magazine article is much better than the PC Gamer. They're both good, but the PC Magazine article is fantastic. I'm going to link the links to those in the description below, as well as another article that goes into the most recent statistics about video games and who plays them and where they're played and all that stuff. So you can educate yourself all you want. You have all the data you could want, opinions, facts, graphs, charts, the whole shittery. Okay? So, now, having said all that, let's get into my personal, this is where it's going to get political, okay? And, you know, again, could be YouTube suicide here for my channel, but I'm going to do it anyway. I don't give a shit. So, I consider myself a libertarian. I want all of my rights. All of them. I don't care. I want them all. Because I think it's the most important thing about our country is our rights. I own weapons. I should say I own guns. I guess in the military they teach you to call your rifle, or what they teach you to call it, a weapon. You don't use the term gun. You say your weapon or your rifle or whatever. I own guns. I also own a gun safe, which all of my guns are safely put away, and I am a responsible gun owner in the whole bit. So I'm not anti-Second Amendment or any. I am absolutely pro-Second Amendment. I am not a member of the NRA. I do not agree with, fundamentally, with a lot of what they stand for. I think they take it way too far, and they play that slippery slope game, saying that everything's a slippery slope. You can't have background checks, and you can't have registration, and you can't have, you know, no, we got to get to a point where we have something. We got to get to a point where somehow some type of system is triggering when people who are already known to be troubled, mentally ill, whatever, are buying large amounts of ammunition, magazines, you know, whatever, some type of system to alert somebody and say, hey, we got a little abnormality here. You may want to check on this person, you know, or when they do a comprehensive background check or whatnot, make the stipulations for getting approved for that harder. You know, we got to get some. But the first step is we collectively and Congress and everybody have to be allowed to have this started conversation about it. But the NRA doesn't even want that. They don't even want the conversation to be allowed to go forward. For whatever, you know, they're lobbyists and they want the money from their membership to continue, and they're afraid if they give even the slightest inch that they're going to lose membership and so forth. And then of course the politicians, and yes, I am speaking specifically to Republicans here for the most part. I know very few Democrats that don't want to go up against the NRA, you know, because the NRA, the members generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, vote Republican. So the Republican politicians are in step with the NRA because they don't want to lose the votes. NRA doesn't want to lose membership. Republicans don't want to lose the votes. So what you have is nothing gets done. Nothing even gets discussed. It's bullshit. Okay? So let's segue now into the next part of that. When you have a commander-in-chief, the executive of the United States, the chief executive, President of the United States, when you have him continually go to rallies and demonize a particular demographic of people, immigrants, Latinos, Mexicans, whatever terminology he chooses to use at that time, he says things like, calls them invaders, and that he stigmatizes them with all these different labels, and he charges up his followers with all of this rhetoric. There's going to be a certain segment, however small, that is going to hear that, and they are probably already mentally unstable, and they're going to hear that as a call to arms to go and do something about it, because their president is telling them, we have a problem and we've got to fix it. And these people who are already unstable, probably, who, speaking specifically of this shooter in El Paso, hears that as a call to arms and says, I got to do something. He writes a manifesto even talking about that. We've got to change that. I mean, Mr. President, I'm speaking to, he'll never see this, but in the 1/1,000,000% chance that he, 1/1,000,000th of 1% chance he sees this, Mr. President, you've got to stop that shit. Period. You talk like a leader. When you're down in Florida and you're talking about the invaders coming across the border and everything else, and somebody in the audience, and he says something, what are we going to do about it? Trump says, what are we going to do about it? And somebody in your audience yells out, shoot them. That's what they yelled out. And how did you react, Mr. President? You reacted by saying, only in the panhandle can you get away with that. That was your reaction. When your reaction should have been, no, stop that. We are not going to have that. We are not going to incite violence. We're not going to advocate violence of any sort. Please do not do that again. And I am telling everyone in this room, do not do that. That is not what that is how you should have responded to that. And everybody knows it. You chose not to, Mr. President. That's just one example. There's the tweets and everything else. So, I don't care if it's Trump. I don't care if another politician got up and did the same thing. I would slam. I don't care if they're Democrat, Libertarian. I don't care, party aside. If they did that shit, I'm going to slam them. It doesn't mean anything. No one's going to see it anyway. But I'm getting this shit out. I'm venting. Okay? So, couple things. Call yourself out on your own rhetoric. Be a man. Step up and say, you know what? I was wrong. We know he won't do that. We know President Trump's demeanor. We know his ego. We know all that. We know he's not capable of doing that. But he should. Anybody else would say, I was wrong. I've got to control that tempo, the tone, however you want to categorize it. When I speak to the American people, I've got to meter what I say and how I say it. He won't do that, but that's what he should do. And of course, the NRA should, they won't, but they should give a little and say, okay, let's start a discussion. What can we do? All of us, NRA included, what can we do to try and help this problem of gun violence? Okay? Anyway, I'll probably lose half my subscribers that are Republicans out there. And again, I'm not a Democrat. I consider myself a libertarian. I generally, I'll go out. I'm leaning. I lean in the Bernie Sanders type area. So that's my leanings. But you know, hey, it is what it is. I feel for all the families affected. In Dayton, El Paso. Yes, Dayton, Mr. President. Not Toledo. It was Dayton was the other shooting. Anyway, I know this is a gaming channel. I know I got political, but they crossed the streams. Not supposed to cross the goddamn streams, and they came into the video game realm and basically opened up a can of worms again, you know, trying to lay it on our hobby. And when Japan, China, all these other places, South Korea, my God, they all play video games. I mean, it's like 2.5 billion people play video games worldwide. 2.5 billion people play video games, and they want to. Hell, if that was what was the cause, you'd have shootings everywhere, all over the place, all over the world, in every country, constantly. Bet you don't. So, anyway, I've gone on long enough. I would appreciate it if you would leave comments below. Let me know your feelings. Again, I will link those articles below. And I'll show this again in case you're interested in reading this or picking it up. If you don't know about it, it's by let me move that. There you go. It's by William Deere. He is the guy. He was the private investigator that did the investigation, and then he wrote the book. So, just so you know, Dallas Egbert did successfully commit suicide eventually. He tried a couple more times and failed, and then he finally did the deed. And again, it had nothing to do with, it's all in the book, but it had nothing to do with Dungeons and Dragons. Nothing. So anyway, guys, next video, hopefully on a lot better subject, not political, back to the gaming thing. Thanks for putting up with me. We'll catch you on the flip side.